I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either gonna be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
Hi, and welcome to Kay Let's Talk, the podcast where we break down storytelling across books, television, and film with a special love for book-to-screen adaptations. Here, we talk about craft, character arcs, structure, dialogue, visual language, and the creative choices that shape how a story lands. If you like thoughtful conversational deep dives into the stories you can't stop thinking about, you're in the right place. Let's talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. This week, I wanted to start a series that I've been anxious to put together, and it's going to focus on the soundtrack and score of Heated Rivalry and break each episode down to dive into the way that the show uses songs and music to further convey this story. And this all was started originally from an article that Jacob Tierney was interviewed for called Power Play Behind the Music of Heated Rivalry. It was really fascinating to me, and I thought that it might be a really great series to go episode by episode and discuss the music choices in this show, because I think that this particular show does an extraordinary job of using that as a narrative device and using it in very interesting ways that help to further tell the story and move the plot along. So I figured we could go episode by episode because I do have a lot of commentary on these songs and the song choices and the scenes that they are used in. So this episode will cover episode 1 of Heated Rivalry. I have done a few TikTok videos where I talk about specific songs from the score and the soundtrack, and I've broken those down a few different ways. So if you're interested in listening to any of those, you can find them on both my Instagram page and my TikTok page. But first, I want to talk about the article that I read that originally tipped me off to doing this in a podcast series, because I think that this conversation that Jacob has about the music and how it shaped the first season of the show is really important and interesting. And the music was a really central creative force in Jacob's work, and he has said numerous times that he is very much dependent on it when he's writing scripts and throughout the whole process of him pulling together this show. And we've heard him say that across numerous interviews and all throughout his awards circuit. This article appears in a sketchbook format, so it sort of blends reporting and illustration and visual storytelling, which again, I think is a great method of telling this story and writing this article, because Heated Rivalry feels so well-rounded because it uses all the different methods of storytelling. It creates a lot of visual and narrative callbacks throughout the whole story, and all of those layers that we get from each department, each creative department, the lighting, the color choices, the clothing and costume design, all of that helps make this feel fully actualized and genuinely real, and these people feel real. And the music is such a small part of that, but it has a really large impact on top of what we're seeing when watching TV or film. Instead of the traditional interview transcript, because it's using images and screenshots and captions to portray Tierney's creative process, the visuals are the subject matter, and the story about his artistic influences, it's kind of framed through these little fragments of his personal history and how he came to be in this position to make this show. And obviously, as the showrunner and director of this project and others, his choices really run the gambit here. And so his selections for songs really help to convey how much of himself and his own taste and his personal listening habits helped shape this show, because a lot of scenes that he wrote were inspired by these song choices too. And as a result, it involves a lot of pop culture in the show too, especially considering that this story takes place in the past and spans such a large swath of time. Soundtrack choices traditionally can be used to shape audience reactions, of course, but in this case, it's also helped to revive a lot of songs. And on top of that, it's launched many artists' careers. And those types of stories really kind of help further define what the show's identity is and how it has carved its own unique angle outside of the TV show and of the book to include these really kind of viral music moments that we've seen all over the internet, especially when you think of All the Things She Said and the remix version of that. Those are almost now as impactful as the writing changes and the cinematography choices that help differentiate the show from the book. And in the book, we really don't get the audio aspect of it, unless, of course, you're listening to the audiobook. But even then, you're not getting that kind of added layer that helps to convey feelings. We're relying on the characters' internal dialogues, and the music in this show helps to add that other layer to help depict each of these characters and tell the story. Within the article, Jacob also revealed that he often writes his scripts while listening to playlists. So he'll create playlists for the script that he's writing. He really loves to highlight and focus on Canadian musicians, which we see throughout this show, especially since it was made in Canada. I think that's even more of an homage to how important that is to him to include Canadian artists and Canadian culture. He also approaches songs before filming begins. But I know throughout a few of the interviews he gave for Heated Rivalry after the show premiered that they had trouble getting certain songs, so he did have to pivot on some things. And he also talks about how music helps to define the identity of the show and some of his earlier projects, and how certain songs can really attach themselves to a show or a character and give it a secondary life. And I think that there's a number of songs in this show that can be applied to now. I think something that's really special about Jacob's approach and what I find most fascinating is that the soundtrack isn't selected to fit scenes after the fact. We often see that happen in shows where they're inserted because they're maybe cultural hits or they're viral at the moment and they will appeal to mass audiences. But instead, the songs in this show are such a big part of his creative process from a very early stage of writing the scripts themselves, that they shape the scene itself and create that tone and the pacing or even the emotional messaging that he's trying to convey in the scene itself. So they very much inform the way that he writes these scenes, which I think is really interesting. It's also very clear that, like I said, he has a strong desire to keep the show very Canadian in all areas he can control, and not just because it's a hockey story and a Canadian story, but I think Jacob really loves to find and use independent Canadian artists because he, of course, loves the music, but it also keeps the show true to that identity. And in a professional sense, it certainly helps to keep listening costs lower, too, if you're using smaller indie artists. But it has always felt like Jacob would have chosen these songs regardless of the budget. Even if he had an unlimited budget for the soundtrack, I think these are the types of songs he would have gravitated towards anyway. And he chose them because he loved them and wanted to use them in this version of the story that he's telling. That reverence that he has for the artistry and the creativity that he has when writing and creating a show like this, it bleeds into every area of a show. And the music certainly is very impactful because we feel that intention in every scene where we get these big musical moments. And I think that the collaboration and trust he had with Peter on the score kind of mirrors that. One of the more interesting claims in the article is that the show's popularity has boosted attention for a few featured musicians and artists. And it's also created a lot of fan analysis for the soundtrack, which I certainly have partaken in myself. And I know that I certainly went through all of the songs and started to dissect them after my first watch of each episode because they were so intentionally placed. And it was clear that certain montages in particular were shot to align themselves with the song and the soundtrack. But it's also created a lot of fandom around some of the bigger songs, which we can see in a lot of the fan videos online that have been made, all of the promotional materials. We saw it during hockey games at the professional level on both the men and women's sides. I went to an NHL game and they played All the Things She Said and Wolf Parade at that game. We can also see the commercial impact for the soundtrack itself with the release of the CD, vinyl, and cassette tape versions, and all of those have made a huge commercial impact for both the show and the artists themselves. So this is all proof again that the right song choice can truly create a viral moment. And now that so many of these songs are going to be forever synonymous with the show, it's sort of another way of hammering home that there has been this big cultural moment that people are referring to as the heated rivalry effect. I think for me, one of the most important things that Jacob highlights in this interview is that this story is also a romance, so the soundtrack inevitably becomes part of how the audience experiences the characters' emotions and their feelings of longing and connection and vulnerability as we watch them grow up and fall in love throughout the series. And music is how the unspoken words of characters can be conveyed to us. And in a show where the two protagonists are deeply internal, struggle with communication, and have communication issues, not to mention one of them is speaking in their second language, they don't know how to be vulnerable with one another at the beginning. And so the lyrics of a song can do a lot of heavy lifting for that reason. So let's get into the particulars of episode 1. And I actually wanted to start with a song that's featured in the original trailer for the show and isn't actually in the episode itself. And it's called I Feel Free by Dilly Dally, which is a alternative rock band from Toronto. And this particular song, it reminded me a lot of the song Save Me from the show Smallville. I don't know if anyone else watched that show growing up. And it came out right after the band nearly broke up. So there's a lot of kind of drama in this song, which I think is perfect for the trailer. And the line that stuck out to me in the lyrics, which isn't really even in the trailer, was a line that says, "Still couldn't be friends, but I want you to find what might make sense." And the whole lead up throughout the song feels like this build up to a big life-changing risk or life-changing event, which I think is why it reminds me of Smallville and the Smallville theme, because it also shares that sort of larger than life feeling to it and how that mirrors the emotions of these two characters, where this chance meeting and encounter that they have, these two people that shouldn't meet if not for finding themselves at the pinnacle of their sport and they're the same ages and everything kind of aligned for them to find each other. It does feel like a really life-changing event, and this song kind of mirrors that emotionally. The line of lyric that we hear in the trailer itself is "try to stay because this already hurt you," and then the rest of it is really just the instrumentals. And I think that that line in particular being the one that they chose to share, it's the beginning of the chorus. It's kind of the high point of the song. And I think that was really impactful. But I also think that it'll be interesting to see how they approach the trailer for season 2, because so many fans were creating fan edits and using such different types of music to put together trailers and promotion. So I'm really curious to see what they choose for the season 2 trailer. So the first actual song we hear used in episode 1 and the show in general is the song Rivalry by Peter, which is part of the score. And it plays beneath the announcer voiceovers when we are first introduced to both Shane and Ilya. And it's the opening theme for them as characters, but also the show. So it has this very on-the-nose reference to sports theme music. And I found that it kind of was a nod to a song called Kerncraft 400, which is actually the Bruins' current goal song, because they both have this very synthy, upbeat techno sound to them. But Rivalry as a song has this build up, and then the song slows back down at the end and lightens up in the last 35 seconds and sounds more optimistic, but also anticipatory. So it's a very good reflection of what we can expect to see between these two. And even though the song is called Rivalry, we know that the two of these characters don't ever actually have a real rivalry, and I think the song itself sort of reflects that sentiment. The second song that we hear in the show is Symphony Number 29 by Mozart, which is when Shane and Ilya are shooting the commercial in Toronto. And this song was written in April 1774 when Mozart was only 18 years old and is actually one of his better-known pieces. For film and TV, directors will frequently use well-known classical pieces in order to add layers of meaning to a scene without needing additional dialogue by way of lyrics. So we know that we will get more of this in season 2, thanks to Jacob giving a lot of interviews talking about how he plans to use a few more songs by Mozart. But a song like this one works well in this scene because it's recognizable, but it's also a song that's flexible across different moods. So in this particular scene, there's humor, there's tension, there's seriousness, but there's a little of everything. So to have this song be playing in the background, it doesn't solidify that we're supposed to feel one particular way because the characters don't feel one particular way. And it's still very early in their dynamic, and we're getting to know the tone of the characters and also of the show itself. So to insert this song here is another example to me of the show taking itself seriously by way of its music choices, and also how pointedly they're going to use songs in the scenes. Because this song itself is used in a way where you can tell it's being played inside the rink rather than overlaid on top of the scene, which gives the world a real richness to it because the soundtrack is a combination of overlaid music and self-inserted background noise that the characters themselves can hear. So classical songs, even though they're often used in historical works, I think perhaps the use of it inside the rink where Jacob, who is playing the director in this commercial, is almost a nod to what he himself would be listening to on a set like this if he was truly directing this commercial. The next song in the episode is the song Melt by Peter Peter, which takes place in the shower scene. And this song plays in a moment where we can tell that their attraction is new and curious, and the music builds like a heartbeat, but the notes themselves don't really change throughout the duration of this song. It's more like a layered production of the same notes with shorter repetitive notes on top of it to imply that their bodies are taking over and they're having a real physical response to one another. And the feeling is almost like it's trapped in this shower because they haven't acted on anything yet, so there's no real consequences, which allows that song to end on these really high tempo, quick notes that we can hear. And then the heartbeat section, it feels like the moment where things escalate, but it doesn't modulate upwards harmonically. It's like the attraction increases, but everything stays within the same tonal space. So typically with a song like this, when we say that a song builds, the notes will get higher or the tempo will shift and change. This song builds without the notes going higher musically. So it's kind of why the music feels intense, but almost trapped again within this shower scene. And I also like the idea that both of them are naked in the shower, and that really strips them of any of their defenses. It strips them of their more public personas, and the rivalry that they have between them is also stripped away. So they're left naked both physically and metaphorically. And I think that that's a really beautiful sentiment to me. And this song is a way to showcase how they feel once they're able to stand beside one another and be so open-faced. And obviously we know throughout the show that Shane melts into Ilya physically, which is a nod to the title of this song. So that word means something in that context, but it also could mean that the water and the shower here is also melting their defenses away as well. The next song in the show, in the episode 1, is Sea Lion by Feist. And this is when Shane is waiting for Ilya to show up to his hotel room. And this song is actually a reinterpreted version of a song called Sea Lion Woman. And it's a traditional folk song. And so most interpretations kind of focus on the mysterious woman of the narrative who moves through all these different identities and embodies all these different things, which makes sense because we see Shane going through multiple outfits, sitting in different locations within the room, fidgeting, and trying to find a way to make himself comfortable within his own body before Ilya arrives to his hotel room. The song itself, though, it almost feels like a chanting type song with the amount of repeated lines that we hear. And the tempo also kind of helps us understand Shane's nervousness, but also Ilya's as well, because both of them are experiencing those feelings, despite the fact that Shane thinks that Ilya is cool as a cucumber when he arrives. We as a viewer get to see that he's not when he's in the elevator. And that sort of pulsing nature of the song, again, helps to hammer home not only that there's sexual tension, but a real sense of anticipation for what might happen next between them, and the decision for them to step past a true point of no return that both characters realize is about to take place. The lyrics also kind of mirror that because it talks about all sorts of outcomes. And since us as viewers and the characters themselves don't know how this night is going to end, that feels really pointed too. The song implies that it could be lust or love, but also betrayal, because the last line of the song is actually about someone being stabbed in the back. So I think that the lyrics, if you look them up, are really interesting. It's sea lion woman, she drink coffee, she drink tea, and rooster crows. Sea lion woman, she drink coffee, she drink tea, and rooster crows. And it describes sea lion woman dressed in red, smile at the man when you wake up in his bed. Sea lion woman dressed in black, wink at the man, and then stab him in the back. The next song in episode 1 is Those English Words Just Roll Off Your Tongue by Peter Peter. And this takes place in the hotel room after Shane and Ilya share their first kiss with one another, and they're about to escalate things further. I love the title of this song because it matches the dialogue that Shane delivers to Ilya the moment he realizes that they're being honest with each other about their attraction. And it also highlights again that they have a language barrier, which is so important early on because they really do not talk. They communicate with their physicality. And the song plays right after they've already kissed, which is so impactful to have no music over that moment. And we get to hear that raw audio where we can hear their clothes brushing, we can hear their hands on each other's bodies, we can hear the kisses themselves. And then after they cross that line and they're deciding whether or not to venture further, that's when this song starts playing. And it's a very suspenseful, slow, tentative song. So as they both question whether or not to proceed here, the song sort of helps to convey how they're both feeling nervous about what the other one is going to say or do. And the song also has this sort of slow build up to suggest how charged the moment is without the music fully taking over, and how neither of them is stopping anything. They're just letting it proceed. And as it gets heavier and heavier, the song itself grows louder. And throughout the scene progression, we get to understand and feel how they're feeling internally, and that rush of anxiety, and then how it turns into adrenaline, and then walking up to the edge of something that scares you and deciding to take that step over it and keep going over the edge of that. And so when the song ends, the volume retreats back down as the two of them are coming back down from that high point of the moment. So it really does a great job of encapsulating that really fizzy feeling that people have when they're experiencing another person like this for the first time. The next song in episode 1 is a song that plays when Shane is meeting his parents for lunch. And it's a song that's translated into A Perfect Day or The Perfect Day. And this song is basically about someone who has all these little pieces of their life that feel good on the surface, but they're missing the one thing that would give it all meaning and make it all meaningful. And so in the lyrics, which are in French, and I think that's really cool and pointed because the scene is taking place in Montreal and the artists themselves is Quebecois, and the music is really deeply associated with Montreal and Quebec and the indie music scene from the 2000s and 2010s. And for people who are from that area, this song will feel really emotionally authentic, but the translated lyrics refer to a map but no mission, an invitation but no address, time but nowhere to go, sound but no image, an ending but no beginning. And it implies that until someone enters this person's life and gives everything meaning and purpose, they're lacking a meaning to their existence. And so having this song overlaid in a moment that takes place after Shane's life literally changes forever, after his first experience with Ilya and his first experience with a man, we can see how he was watching videos of Ilya before he met his parents. So Ilya is definitely front of mind. And if you know the lyrics and the translation, you can piece together that Ilya is going to be that person that was missing and gives Shane's life that meaning. The next song in episode 1 is Face Off by Peter Peter. And this plays over the interview that Shane gives in French. It's a scene that's very performative on Shane's part. Shane's speaking French. It's this idea of him being on display as a professional athlete and how he's always trying to be sure that he's saying the right thing and being the right thing and the right version of himself publicly. And then to contrast that, we see Ilya on the receiving end watching it on the TV in his hotel room and comparing himself to Shane, because in the book, Ilya thinks that his accent makes him sound like a cartoon villain. And so hearing Shane's perfect French highlights an insecurity that he has within himself. But the song itself, it has that very fast tempo that ties it back to the main theme music at the top of the episode. And it's teaching us indirectly that this style of song is going to play whenever we have a hockey-related scene. So anytime we hear those synthy techno beats that slowly and gradually add more layers of sound on top of one another, and then pick that pace up, reach a climax, and then pull the instruments back and fade back out again, that becomes a pattern that we associate with any of these hockey moments. And I do think the overarching feel of this song in particular, it's almost like a controlled energy where Shane is trying to embody this persona when he's being interviewed and control his energy, but it also is reflective of Ilya as he's trying to control his own energy and he's realizing how obsessed with Shane Hollander he is. The next song is Common Goal by Peter Peter, and this is when both Shane and Ilya are giving their interview and they do the foot tapping under the table. And I find this title interesting because it's also the name of one of Rachel's books. This is another situation where the beat in the back of the song is that same fast tempo as all the other hockey scenes, but it's also a scene where we see the two of them coming together and supporting each other, which is reflective of the title, Common Goal. They're both talking about their individual goals for the season, but the foot taps are also implying that they have common goals with each other. They're both moving towards the same objectives, and both of them personally want their teams to get back into the playoffs and win cups. And they understand that that's going to require a similar effort from both of them. And they're choosing to help shoulder that load here when Shane assists Ilya in answering the press. And the two of them are both operating within a system that's new to them. This is their first year in the NHL, and they're learning how to navigate it together for the first time. So their decision to help each other from the jump shows us as viewers that they really don't buy into the rivalry at all. In fact, it's actually the opposite. So the feeling this song gives us overlaying this moment is very optimistic. And I think that that's purposefully done so that it's clear, even though they're not speaking to one another and they're hardly even looking at one another, that optimistic theme music reiterates that there is no rivalry here between them. There's actually a lot of deep respect for one another. The next song is Heartbeat 1 by Peter Peter, and this takes place in the second hookup scene, and it's one of 4 songs in this Heartbeat series. And this song sort of feels like it's meant to represent the shift from the first connection into a continuation of their previous moment of physical intimacy. So you'll recognize that they both kind of are operating in this new reality where they've both acknowledged that they've crossed the line. They're over it now and they jump right into things. The hesitation is completely gone, but their emotions are still catching up with that. So the scene itself feels really heavily charged. Both of them kind of let the moment run away until Shane brings them back down to earth. And that's when we hear the score sort of fizzle out, when they both take a moment to think things through more fully. So the song is representative of just how explosive their attraction is and how it can make both of them behave without thinking. The way the song itself swells is a great introduction to the suite of songs called Heartbeat, which again, there are 4 of them total, because there's a lot of intensity, but all of the songs are placed in strategic moments to help inform the relationship progression between Shane and Ilya. So here it's very charged and pulsing. It feels very intimate, and then it fizzles out because there's still hesitation between them. So because the song is the first one we hear in this series, we're going to be able to start to recognize a pattern through the score as the series goes on. So whenever that heartbeat theme returns, it connects scenes together and specific scenes together and points to the characters themselves repeating patterns and cycles. And as we watch them get to know each other and fall in love, the songs themselves also get deeper and deeper emotionally. So this first song, the emotional stakes are higher because they still don't know what they are and what is happening between them, but they know they're clearly attracted to one another in a very crazy and addictive way. So the song is meant to highlight that, and I really love the choice to have it fizzle out, and it feels really like this bubbly, kind of like shake a can of soda and watch it explode type feeling. And then we get all these like fizzy bubbles that are just kind of slowly getting quieter and quieter after the can explodes. And I think that that's a really beautiful visual for this particular song. The next song is another one by Peter. It's Jane and Lily, which is when the two of them exchange their numbers for the first time. And this song has the same upbeat tempo associated with the hockey-specific songs and that synthy techno beat in the background, which makes sense because the scene fades from them exchanging numbers into that moment of anticipation where they're both looking forward to playing each other and getting to see each other and hook up again in Montreal before there's a snowstorm that prevents that from happening. The end of the song sort of reiterates their joint disappointment and not being able to meet up because you can hear the notes sort of fall apart and get sloppy as the two of them go through the motions of their daily lives and realize that the only thing they were both looking forward to was this possibility of seeing each other. So in the beginning, the song mirrors Shane's kind of quiet optimism and joy about exchanging numbers and coming up with a plan, because initially he was nervous about that, and we see him tentatively asking Ilya if he means it or if they should actually do it. And then Ilya takes that initiative. So it's got this sort of light and bouncy vibe to it, kind of like there's this promise of new possibility now that their hookups are going to be moving to a new location like Shane's house. But then again, by the end, the notes are fully unraveling to kind of mirror their disappointment in that plan not coming to fruition. The next song in the episode is a song called No Feedback by a man named Dan Canvas. And this is playing when Shane is doing shots with Scott Hunter at the award show. And there are several lines in this song that suggest someone who is physically present in the moment, but emotionally detached, which totally fits this scene because Shane is physically in the room. He's won his award, but his attention is entirely on finding Ilya. And I think that it's true that a character can be surrounded by people, but still feel disconnected. And a song like this is another narrative way that we can reinforce that concept if you couldn't pick up on it from Hudson Williams' acting and Shane's body language in this scene. So it makes the bar that he's standing in an area where we watch him be an observer rather than a participant in what's going on around him. And the song itself is very upbeat and poppy, so it is a perfect placement here because it would be something that would be playing all over the speakers in this bar. And while Shane is being social on the surface, we can see him actually being deeply introspective underneath everything else that's going on. The next song in the episode is one of my favorites. It is Two Souls by Peter, and this is the song that ends the episode and plays during their Vegas rooftop kiss. And it starts specifically when Shane says, "I just needed some air." The song masterfully layers the sounds and melodies from the key of C, and it starts with this much more melodramatic and sad sound with this synthy organ at the beginning while they start to argue with one another. And this is not the way either of them want the interaction to go. They're having a hard time communicating, and it's not a comfortable place to stay. And so we see them both trying to navigate out of that discomfort in the conversation here during this interaction. And the music is meant to reflect that and also mirror this concept that they're still two separate souls at this point because they haven't figured out how to talk. When Ilya starts to yell, the song is sort of built upon with the addition of this very short, quick, layered note. It's very subtle. It's almost like a metronomic clicking sound in the background with this very quick rhythm. And it sort of represents nervousness or anxiety, similar to a rising heartbeat. And Ilya admits that he goes home in 3 days, and that would have been a really big thing for him to admit. So I think that it would fit with him feeling nervous here. And that's heightened when Shane doesn't understand how he's trying to connect with him on a deeper level by sharing that he's going home in 3 days with him. So that sad melody is representative of their own repressed feelings, that misalignment in communication, and their own sadness in that moment, because there's this missed opportunity to communicate with words. And because of that, they only know how to communicate physically. And in the book, Ilya doesn't snap in the same way that he does in the show. And Shane thinks to himself that Ilya seems sad, and it makes him care for Ilya in that moment and feel bad for him for one of the first times in their story. But that's when this song adds the next layer, which is this 3 quick notes repeating over and over and pulsing in the same way that we see the notes repeated in Heartbeat 1 or at the end of the song Melt. And Peter does an incredible job of replicating that physiological heartbeat-like rhythm in a number of songs on the soundtrack in a subtle way that relates them to one another. So this is the second melody of the song, and it happens right at the moment Shane starts to recognize that Ilya is closing himself off by clenching his jaw, and he can tell he isn't going to get anywhere with him. And that's when the song starts to grow louder too, when Shane says, and I guess I thought maybe we never mind. And when the song starts to layer that second melody over the first, starting with the slower synth in the lower range and then adding in these staccato, higher, brighter, and sharper notes, the most intuitive interpretation, especially given the title of the piece, is that each character is represented by one of these layers. So Ilya is alone on the rooftop first and remains there until the scene ends, mirrored by the music's initial focus on that slower, lower register. And it's the sadder and slower one, the lower register. So Ilya's been up there all night alone, smoking, because he's sad. And he's sad about his family, and he's sad about going home. And he's sad when he tries to make that bid for connection with Shane, and Shane doesn't understand it. And then he's sad again when Shane stops kissing him and pushes him away and doesn't let him continue. And then he's sad when Shane walks away from him. So to me, he gets the lower register. And then when Shane reaches out his hand and extends it to Ilya, Ilya turns and begins to walk down the stairs. And that's when that higher melody with those 3 oscillating notes change. So the notes shift and imply a shift in their emotional dynamic. And the notes, to me, almost sound curious, maybe. So Shane is wondering what Ilya is doing. And then Ilya kisses him. And internally, Shane experiences panic, then excitement, and then frustration, both at Ilya's actions and then also, I think, by his own reaction to it. And when the kiss breaks, both melodies stop, pausing pretty momentarily, right when Shane creates distance and Ilya tries to maintain closeness. The recorded version of the song, which is different from the one in the show, has only a brief pause before the melodies restart together and create that joined harmony, but the show actually lowers the volume when the melodies resume, so the impact is a lot more subtle. And when it reconvenes, there is a new harmonic layer to it, which are actually the notes from the song One Soul that we will hear in the finale of the show. So those notes from One Soul are used similarly in that clipped staccato rhythmic way that we hear in the Heartbeat series, but they're also in that upper melody of this song. So the beats per minute for this song is closer to 140, so it has a lot of momentum, and we maintain a tiered musicality with that staccato piano note and the synth in the background. And then on top of that is this very subtle One Soul melody that gets layered over the top of everything. But it's, again, not in the foreground of the song. So it's like this tiny little suggestion and foreshadowing to what their relationship could be, and a little glimpse into what their theme song is going to be. And it also reflects this disjointed nature of their emotional connection at this point in the story and in this moment of the episode, because while still gesturing towards the optimism of how these two might ultimately sound, quote unquote, once they're aligned and emotionally in sync. We haven't gotten there yet. So again, we only get this little glimpse through this song, and I think it's such a beautiful song to end episode 1 on. And again, refer back to by the time we get to episode 6. So that's the music from episode 1 of Heated Rivalry, both soundtrack and score. I hope that you enjoyed the breakdown of these. I think that there's so many great songs in all of these episodes for us to talk about. So again, I'm really excited about this series and breaking down the songs and music further. And I think that Jacob's a really brilliant writer, but also it's a skill to pick songs and have them work so well for a show. All of these scenes, I really can't picture another song doing double duty in as effective a way as they do in this show. So I'm really excited to talk further about this. I hope you guys are excited about this series, and I am looking forward to recording all of the other episodes and talking about that with you guys. Also, I will be continuing my Q&A series because I have so many wonderful questions from listeners that I am looking to cover. So whether I do all of these music episodes in a row or I sprinkle in some of the Q&As in between, I am hoping that we will have plenty of content to get us through until season 2 airs. And as always, if you have a question or a topic that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, please feel free to send me a message both on Instagram or on TikTok, and I will be happy to add it to the bucket of content that I hope to record between now and the start of season 2. As always, if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to you in our next chat.